It was August 9th, 1993, when a bunch of Ukrainian kayakers were rafting nearby the mountain range called Khamar Daban. And they were having a good time. They were enjoying the nature, enjoying the scene, all the beauty that nature offers. And in one point they saw a girl, right, that was standing completely alone, and she was so disoriented, and it just looked like she was looking, through them without any clear mind, if you can say, in that kind of manner. So obviously that scene was very strange at first sight, and in second sight, and in third. So after they passed and the girl just wasn't reacting at all, they just knew something wasn't right, and they decided to turn their kayak and go to the girl and in some kind of way try to help her, because she obviously was in some kind of deep state of shock. Now the thing is that even after they rescued her, she still didn't manage to say a single word. So now they started wondering what the hell is wrong with this person, what the hell happened. I mean, she looks so traumatized. And they go back into the civilization, and after some time she finally started talking. And they established that this person was Valentina Utochenko. Now, what's even more disturbing part than her freaked out behavior is the fact that she wasn't alone. I mean, yes, in that particular moment she was alone, but she was actually with 6 other people on a hike, and those 6 people were nowhere to be found. So the next logical question was, where the hell are those people, and why she was completely alone, wandering through the woods in some kind of bloody jacket and washed up clothes? And for the answer, we need to go back 7 days in the past. It was August the 2nd when 7 hikers in total planned a routine hike through the mountain range called Khamar Daban. The group of hikers consisted of Tatiana Filipenko, Alexander Krisin, Denis Shvachkin, Viktoria Zalesova, Timar Bapanov, and Valentina Utochenko. So 6 people, and all of them were basically teenagers or in the early 20s. But despite their young age, they were still very physically well prepared, and they were very experienced. So this particular path was supposed to be a routine adventure. Now, this group was led by a woman named Lyudmila Korovina. And this woman had a huge experience both in, let's say, domestic mountains and on international stage. In essence, very well prepared woman with a huge experience, and she was definitely knowing what she was doing. And that applies even more when it came to this particular region, because at that point she had like so many climbs and descents on Khamar Daban. But one downside, if you can call it that, when it came to Lyudmila, is that people who knew her often described her as so rigorous. So she was going basically to extremes in some situations, and she tried to apply that on her students as well. Now, at the starting point in the bottom of the mountain, everything was looking like super tidy and good. They had enough food, they had enough supplies, everybody was very well prepared physically and mentally, and actually the weather forecast was predicting some really good weather for their little adventure. As it happens, on that day there were 2 more groups of hikers that were going on the same mountain range, and one of them was led actually by Lyudmila's daughter called Natalia. And the plan was that at one point 2 groups like intersect and continue together on their path. So when we sum all this up, everything was basically looking perfect until it wasn't. By August the 4th, that pretty forecast weather proved out to be basically a bunch of bullshit, because cold rains were hammering them like nothing, and actually an upcoming snowstorm was also on the way. Now, because of this pretty bad weather, the group was basically forced to take another route and missed their meeting point with Natalia. And after Natalia got there and they were nowhere to be found, she just assumed that the really bad weather held them off, and she just continued further with her group. So Lyudmila's group continued the climb, and at what point they decided to make a camp in the middle of basically nowhere. So that decision is still questioned to this very day. So why at this particular spot? Because they had like 30 minutes left to the top, and they also have a second option to set up camp in wooded area. So it was very relatively nearby. And they decided to set camp in the middle of nowhere and be exposed to this extremely bad weather. So you can see why many question that decision. And in the cases like this of an extremely bad weather, you always have like some kind of security house at the summit. So the place where you can rest and, you know, regroup and continue when the weather is better. However, some survivalist experts and her close friends were able to explain this particular move by saying that she wanted to teach her students how to survive in the worst possible conditions. And basically, those conditions were extremely bad. I mean, look at this photo. You can just see through this photo and you can feel it, how they were pounded by rain and heavy winds. So it really can't get any worse than this. But it turned out that actually it can. The next day, August the 5th, the weather was so bad that they just simply had to keep going. Otherwise, they would like die there on the spot. So they would be buried in the snow, they would be flooded, and that's it. So they have to keep going. So they dropped the summit idea, and after they packed the camp, they started to descend really slowly. Now at this point, the nightmare begins. Only after a couple of minutes, Alexander Krisin, who was the strongest guy and probably the most well-prepared guy in the group, and he was also very close to Lyudmila. He was basically her adopted son, you can say. He just fell on the ground and started folding and shaking. Now everybody were in a state of shock and wondered what the hell happened. But the situation will only get worse, and not just for him, for everybody. He soon started to foam from his mouth, and Jesus Christ, this is so disturbing, and blood was going out of his eyes and his ears at the same time. Now Lyudmila, as the leader of the group, quickly gets to him and orders the two remaining men, so Denis and Timur, to lead the group downhill while she was there and trying to help Alexander. The group was like not completely okay with that decision, but you know, since Lyudmila was the boss, they just listened and started to descend further. Now, they didn't even properly start to descend when they heard scream, a big loud scream, and they quickly rushed back up the mountain to check what it is. And after they got there, what a scene it was. So Alexander, who was in very bad shape, was now dead. He was dead, and Lyudmila was actually experiencing the same things as Alexander. So bleeding and folding on the floor. Now the rest of them was standing there in a complete state of shock. So what the hell was happening? First Alexander, then Lyudmila. But like literally a couple of minutes later, both Victoria and Timur dropped on the floor, and the situation was the same. So bleeding, and there was this. They started to act like they're completely insane. So they started tearing their clothes and, you know, ripping everything, grabbing themselves by the neck. So it looked like some kind of, I don't know, force, invisible force was strangling them. That was the description of Valentina. Now, by some accounts, Valentina tried to help Victoria, and she actually beat her and pushed her away. In this state of horror, the other guy, Denis, just like said, I'm out, man, I'm out, I'm gonna run away. So he tried to run away from the group and hid behind the rock. At that point you had Dennis, who was behind the rocks, Valentina, who was like witnessing this horror show, and Tatiana. And soon after, Tatiana was on the floor and she started doing the same thing. So taking all the clothes, exposing her body to the extreme low temperatures, and this is very disturbing what she did next, by some accounts. So there was like a rock beside her, and all of a sudden she started bashing her head on the rock, like over and over and over again, until she like cracked her skull. So let's just stop here. So imagine you are there. Imagine you are Valentina. So you have Alexander and Lyudmila dead. You had Victoria and Timur dead. You had Tatiana, who was bashing her head on the rock and cracking her skull, dead. You had Dennis that was hiding behind the rock. She described that as complete insanity. So just try to create a photo in your head. I know it's a very disturbing photo, but try to create it. So people dropping dead like flies all of a sudden with no apparent reason, blood everywhere, girl bashing her head on the rock, the other guy just ran away, and you are there. What would you do? From 7 people in total, only 2 left, and 5 of them were gone in a matter of minutes. So Valentina quickly grabs Dennis and they quickly try to run towards the wooded area. But in a couple of seconds, Dennis was also gone. So Valentina was the only survivor and she had absolutely no idea what to do next. Now, she didn't even have the time to think properly because, like I said, put yourself in that position. Who would have time to think properly when all of this happened in a matter of minutes? So she quickly rushed towards the wooded area and found some kind of place to spend the night. Since it was already dark, she knew that she just cannot keep going, and she managed to find a small place under some kind of tree and rock and spent the night there. But she also knew that she couldn't keep going without any supplies whatsoever. So that meant that the next day she would have to go back and take the things surrounded by her dead friends. The next day she decided to get back and get all the supplies that she needed in order to, try to survive, try to find a way back into the civilization. She gathered enough food and she also got a sleeping bag. And the next 3 days she spent like wandering through the woods, and she only managed to find her way to the river by, I think, following the electric wires from electric plants. I hope that is the word, electric plants. You know what I mean. So she finds the way to the river, and that is the time she met with the Ukrainian rafters. After that, like we said, they took her back and she gave the statement to the police, and things really started to get complicated. Now, this whole story doesn't have any sense whatsoever. So 6 completely healthy people just dropped dead in a matter of minutes from some kind of invisible force or something. So it was very strange, it was very disturbing to see, to witness, and the people started wondering, logically, what the hell happened to these people. Now, the first important thing, and we will address this in the second part in the theories, is that the search party, so the rescue party, went on the mountain to retrieve the bodies. I think it was 3 weeks after Valentina showed up. And the reason was we can't go up because it was so bad weather-wise. Now, after a few weeks, the weather finally cleared and they were finally able to go and retrieve the bodies. The team that was sent that day had like some really disturbing description of the scene itself. So their hands were completely black. they were missing their eyes, their tongues. So logically, wild animals were responsible for this because they obviously ate the parts of their bodies. But just imagine their scene. And even one guy was so stressed that he said, I mean, like instead of their eyes, there were like maggots there. And I don't want to imagine this. Let's just move on, man. It is just too much at this point. They sent a couple of bodies back to the nearest city to do an autopsy, right? And they concluded, listen to this now, that they all died of hypothermia. Which at that point, like, if you said like asteroid hit that place and they all dropped, it would make more sense than saying they all died because of hypothermia. Because when we look at the symptoms, only a couple of them were connected, and the other ones, like biting, head bashing against the rocks, bleeding and foaming from the mouth, were just unexplainable and not connected with this theory, with this conclusion in this universe and in all other universes out there. And actually after this, many people started doubting in the official narrative, and a bunch of theories started to develop, whole bunch of this, and we will address them all in the next part. The only thing that is left to say is that people actually started questioning Valentina's testament itself. Is it valid? Is it, like legit? Because when somebody goes through that kind of trauma and shock, their testament could be a little, distorted. She may forgot some things, she may be hallucinated some things as well. So everybody at that point started wondering, is this what really happened? And I guess you're gonna find out in the second part. So we had 7 hikers in total, which were preparing to go on a routine hike through the mountain range called Khamar Daban. Basically a bunch of teenagers who were led by a 41-year-old woman called an ultimate survivalist called Lyudmila Korovina. But as it turns out, it wasn't a routine hiking at all. As you guys can see on this image, the group was also planning to at some point intersect with Lyudmila's daughter called Natalia and continue their path together. However, once again, you can see here, they never made it. On August the 5th, they all experienced very disturbing and gruesome death when they started descending back. All of them except one person, Valentina Utochenko. And that is actually the biggest problem here, Valentina's survival. No matter how many theories I mention here today, and no matter how many theories we discuss, that will always be the issue number one, her being a lone survivor. Now, after their gruesome deaths, Valentina somehow managed to, find her way back into the civilization and regroup with wow, man, I suck today. Once again. So Valentina managed to find her way back into the civilization and regroup with a bunch of rafters, who ultimately rescued her, and she later gave a statement which led the authorities of forming this whole case. And after the investigation and the autopsy, they naturally concluded that they all died of hypothermia, which is, to put it mildly, in my own opinion, a bunch of bullshit. But I guess we're gonna start right there. Theory number 1. So, as I already said in the video, there are some, connections with hypothermia, but there are a lot of things that doesn't add up, such as biting, smashing heads on the rocks, and foaming from the mouth. So I can't connect that kind of symptoms with hypothermia. And one more thing I wanted to address, and the thing why I think that this whole theory with hypothermia is a bunch of bullshit, is the fact that, I'm not any kind of scientist. I'm not a very knowledgeable guy when it comes to this kind of things, but from what I understood, from what I read, in order for somebody to get hypothermia, and theoretically that person has to be like exposed to extreme temperatures for a longer period of time. And the thing here is that they were outside for like merely 5 minutes in total. So yes, they were camping outside, but they were also in their tents, and you can't compare temperature in tents with temperatures outside. And we can't forget that this was actually the month of August, and no matter how cold it was, it certainly wasn't colder than in January or February, just to take that out of the way. And yes, some things are overlapping with hypothermia, such as violently tearing and ripping off your clothes and feeling extreme heat and at particular moments. But the other things just simply doesn't add up, doesn't make any sense whatsoever. I don't know, like saying it was hypothermia seems like an easiest thing to do. They were hammered by cold rains, heavy wind, and who knows what else, like upcoming snowstorm. And when you don't have an answer, it's just like an easiest way to say, yeah, that was that. Like the same thing happened with Dyatlov Pass, if you guys know that case, and I'm completely sure that most of you have heard, because it is very well widely known through the world. They initially also said that hypothermia was responsible for the deaths of all those people. So basically, no matter what happens, like if, for example, if 100 people just drop dead and die in like 2 seconds, yeah, I think that was hypothermia. That is like the golden rule when it comes to unsolved cases. Pin it or something and just get it over with. And for me, it seems like this is pretty much either some kind of cover-up or an extremely lack of efforts from the authorities to actually solve this case. But yeah, believe it or not, the official theory still stands to this very day. It was hypothermia. So in essence, I think they can just go ahead and add bleeding from the eyes and from the ears, as well as foaming from the mouth, as official new symptoms of hypothermia. And that's it. Alright, I'm done. Let's get into theory number 2. So, along with hypothermia, this was actually the second cause of their deaths. And I didn't want to mention this in the video, I wanted to save it for the theories. But basically it says that they also suffered from a lack of protein, so a lack of nutrition. However, again, I don't know what kind of lack of nutrition has the side effects of bleeding from the eyes and from the ears and foaming on the mouth. I mean, I once did an experiment and didn't eat anything for 3 whole days, and I mean, I'm still here, right? So I didn't started falling on the floor and suffering like they did. And on top of that, I also didn't felt the urge to bash my head against, I don't know, this wall or this ceiling or this floor. I also didn't grab myself by the neck and didn't just go on the street and started biting random people. I just went to my fridge and started eating. And it is simple as that. Now you might ask, how could they eat something when they didn't have anything? And that is the thing, they had everything. Valentin actually said that they had like regular meals and they actually ate, so had breakfast that morning when they started to descend. So I don't want to drag this theory around because it is pretty much obvious that this wasn't it, same as hypothermia. But again, somehow the authorities decided those two are like the best match for this case. At this point, it is getting comical, really. But if it wasn't the lack of nutrition, perhaps it was something with nutrition. Now, this actually makes more sense than both hypothermia and lack of nutrition, because when we look at the symptoms, it resembles, I don't know, some kind of food poisoning, perhaps. They were out there, and even though they, carried enough food, enough supplies, As I said in the video, Lyudmila was an extreme survivalist, so she basically tried to teach her students how to survive in the worst possible conditions. And besides camping in the middle of nowhere, which proved out to be, by the way, the very, very bad mistake, she also maybe tried to teach them, I don't know, like which plants or mushrooms or some kind of, I don't know what, is edible and, you know, can save your life in extremely bad situations. However, again, we have the same problem. How the hell Valentina survived? And she herself said that they basically did all things together, like the same things. They drank the same water, they ate the same food, they collected the same plants. I mean, either she has like the most, I don't know, like the strongest immunity system that ever existed, and that is the way how she managed to survive, or this is just like not the case. Also, as we know, Lyudmila was super experienced, and I very highly doubt that she could make like that kind of amateur mistake and, you know, like mistake some kind of mushroom or plant as edible and it was like poisonous. So that's like another reason that I really don't buy into this theory. Now, hypothermia, nothing. Lack of nutrition, nothing. Food poisoning, nothing. But the next one, now we're getting into the, you know, like plausible ones. And the next one really has some, you know, credit to it. So let's see what it is. The fourth one. Now, nerve agent or gas, that is like the first thing that crossed my mind when I first heard about this case, and even before I started researching, only because of the fact they started bleeding from various places on their body, and that is like the first thing when it comes to nerve agents. Now, there is one specific nerve agent that is called Novichok, and this agent was produced in the Soviet Union somewhere between 1970s, if I'm not mistaken, until 1990s. To be more correct, 1993. So the same year that this event occurred. Now, could this be just a coincidence? Yes, but it is a very strange coincidence. Now, the next logical question would be, what the hell are these agents, like gases, doing in a mountain range? And I remind you, Khamar Daban was like a really popular tourist, I don't want to say attraction, but the place that gathered a lot of people, you know, for different hiking tours. But, and there is always that but, like I said in one of my previous videos before, like when it comes to the government, they don't give a fuck about us, man. And you think they just said, yo, no, there's a lot of people going there, we just can't do it on that specific location. And the other guys were like, who cares, man? Like, who cares? We just need to make sure to cover the whole thing up properly. And, you know, that's like really not that difficult. And actually, there is a whole bunch of theories that involve both government and military, operations, but we will mention them briefly later. Now we will focus solely on this particular nerve agent called Novichok. So what is important when it came to Novichok? Now, first you need to understand that even the smallest amount of this deadly nerve agent is enough to kill somebody. And actually, I think I read somewhere that the former Soviet Union, because they collapsed in 1993, they signed some kind of, I don't know, like contract or treaty, I don't know what it's called, but they signed something with the United States that they had to like ban this agent from producing ever because of its mass destruction capabilities. But I don't know if they actually did that. The main thing about Novichok is that it is really a heavy nerve agent, right? And it tends to stay like really low to the ground. And the most disturbing part is it can be like washed away with water. So it can be transferred from one place to another. I mean the particles of the gas itself. And we know it was like really bad weather. Heavy rains were pouring, and the rain itself could be a key player here in this case particularly. We will get into that later. Now, another disturbing thing about Novichok is that it can stay on that particular spot, the particles of the gas, up to 4 months. So that is like a really, really long period of time. And if you guys remember from the video, I said that the rescue team took it really, really slow. They were chilling. So the weather was bad. We just have to hang on a little bit, and then we will, get going on the top. So could they knew what was going on, and they waited for the gas, for the particles to just move on, and then when it's safe, they decided, okay, it's now time to go and retrieve the bodies. Because at the end of the day, it is highly possible that that search party was in some kind of way connected with the military, and they knew that this particular region was used for testing some chemical weapon in the past. As you can see on this video, nobody is actually wearing anything. So any kind of mask, any kind of protection, they basically know it was clear, and it doesn't present any threat for them. I mean, the air itself. Now, another thing that goes on the positive side of this theory is that one of the side effects of inhaling or stepping over the Novichok is suffering from a heart attack. And why is that important? Because they established that Lyudmila actually didn't, died from hypothermia, but from a heart attack, so from a cardiac arrest, because she was so stressed when Alexander Krisin died, and he was again her adopted son. She was so close with him, and she just couldn't handle it, and she, experienced a cardiac arrest. And is this an answer? Absolutely not. But again, one more strange coincidence right there. Now, based off all of this, some theory that I came up with would sound probably something like this. The government and the military did some chemical weapon testing in this region, but months before the group even took off the climb. Now, we already said that they were forced to take different routes, and this particular route was maybe the first time that the person ever crossed in that particular path. And that is why the military chose this exact spot, because it was not visited by humans in the past, and they just felt it is safe enough, even though, once again, I repeat, they don't care. The rain that was falling was able to literally wash some of the particles from one particular spot and bring them onto the path that they were crossing on. Now again, how would that explain Valentina's survival? Now hang on, we're going to get into that in just a bit. So the first guy that crosses over the particles is Alexander Krisin, and we know what happened to him. He just fell on the ground and started experiencing horrible symptoms, bleeding from the eyes, bleeding from the ears, foaming on the mouth, and he quickly started folding, and basically he was gone before he knew it, right? So the second person, Lyudmila, rushed over him, and when she got to him and tried to help him, she inhaled the same substance, so the same particles, and logically the same thing happened to her. Now we know that the group was just standing there. Alexander was dead, Lyudmila was also dead, and the next person that fell to the ground was Tatiana. Why Tatiana? Because when they were standing there, she was the first one to react and rushed both to Lyudmila and Alexander in some hopes, I don't know, of helping them. And soon after, she fell on the floor and started experiencing the same things and ripping the clothes as well. Now both Victoria and Timar started panicking and going insane and running around in circles, and it is very possible that in that process they also stepped over or picked some particles and ended up unfortunately in the same position. The only reason why Valentina was not affected is she was basically very, very lucky. She was just standing there in a complete state of shock and just looking around, people going insane, grabbing themselves by the neck, bashing their heads on the rocks and bleeding from all over the places. So she was standing there, and at that point Dennis, the other guy, was hiding behind the rocks. So a pure coincidence and pure luck, basically. But there are two problems here. After that happened, we said in the video that she grabbed Dennis and they tried to run towards wooded area one more time. Now Dennis just fell and started experiencing the same things, and Valentina still didn't experience anything. So that is the problem number one. Now the problem number two is that we know that Valentina returned to that scene the very next day. And my question is, how didn't she pick up the same particles the very next day? I mean, it can be sort of explained, but a very large portion of things would have to be like in the right place and occur in the perfectly timed manner in order for that to happen. Like, can it just imagine this scenario? She goes into the woods and spend the night there, and over the night, rain continued to fall, and the rain just washed the particles from that place onto another, and when she came back, there was nothing. I mean, I cannot dig up anything more logical than that, really, because not a single explanation would make more sense than this, except for one. Valentina made this whole thing up, and that leads us to the theory number 5. Now, is this the most extreme theory here? Yes. Is it the most possible? Again, the same answer. Yes. Now, what would be the actual reason for her to do this? And I don't know about that. I mean, why did Jeffrey Dahmer store the bodies in and dissolve them into the acid? I don't know. But this seems like the most possible theory regarding the way they all died and regarding the way that she was the only one survived, with an extremely lucky set of circumstances that occurred. Now, I already said that she was in a very deep state of shock when she first encountered the rafters, right? Now, it could be real and it could be all an act, depending on what she knew at that particular time. If she was responsible, then she knew, I have to act this way and, pretend to be completely shocked and in a situation of extremely deep trauma in order for the authorities and police and who God knows what else to believe me that this happened. Just the way I said it. Again, since this is the most extreme theory, I still don't know the answer why she would do anything of this. But we live in a very sick world, and this sick world is filled with sick people with some very sick intentions. The thing that is very suspicious to me, I mean, beside her surviving the whole thing, is the fact that she refused to talk about this. I mean, not just weeks and days after this event, but years to come. So maybe it was true, maybe she was experiencing the insanely big trauma, and every time somebody mentions this case, she has to, relive it all over again in her head, and I can't just imagine how stressful that must be, especially when you consider what kind of gruesome and insane event actually was. But it also can be that she didn't want to talk because she was afraid that she will say something that doesn't blend in, so doesn't match what she said in the first statement she gave. So also we have a number of contradictory statements from Valentina, and that is the part in the video when I said that Mary started questioning her statement. Is it actually legit? Did she started hallucinating? Did she make some things up? I don't know, man. I don't know. I mean, at this point, Valentina seems like a, pretty suspicious person. Now, if Valentina was in some kind of way involved, what would be the method? What method would she use? And again, I'm leaning towards some kind of poison, the easiest way would be she just put some kind of poison in their food or their drinks, and obviously like she didn't drink or ate that herself. So the other people just dropped that on the spot, and that would explain why she was the only one that wasn't affected. I cannot imagine a scenario in which she was like going from person to person and, I don't know, like strangled them or shot them or something. I don't know. I'm blabbering stupid things right now, but because obviously there were no shot wounds or anything. But, you know, that would be my guess. That would be the most logical thing to do. And that is only under the condition if she was involved in any kind of way. And I actually got some interesting thought regarding this whole thing. You remember the scene when Victoria beat her, right? So just imagine, what if this crazy theory actually happened? So just imagine that. And Victoria was like the first one to realize that. And she was trying to attack her. And in that process, she beat her in her arm. So just think about it. I mean, that could explain the marks of Victoria's teeth, and that would confirm her story that she actually beat her. However, the reason for biting would obviously be much different. And as far as Tatiana goes, I mean, she could easily, like, after the whole thing was done, she could easily, like, take her head and smash it against the rocks. I know this sounds like pretty messed up stuff, but I'm just, you know, putting the possible theories out there regarding Valentina's involvement. I mean, it could have happened, right? So they cannot determine if she smashed her head before or after. So that is possibility. I mean, it is crazy one, but it is still a possibility. I don't want to say, yeah, she did it, but when you have the case like this, the first natural response and the answer you formulated in your head is like, that person, you know, has to be deeply investigated. You know, put her in a room, dark room with this kind of light, and question her like 20 hours. We have to find out what happened. But the point is that they just said, okay, yeah, we believe you, that happened, and we will wait for 2 or 3 weeks to send rescue team to retrieve the bodies. And yeah, after they retrieve the bodies to the morgue, okay, yeah, hypothermia, lack of nutrition, bam, case closed, goodbye, have a nice day, do svidanja. I don't know, man, it seems like a pretty fast way to end the actual mystery of this case and what the hell happened with these people. And this is definitely not an ordinary case, so I don't know, man, seems suspicious. One more thing I wanted to mention is that a lot of you don't know, but when I first started doing like YouTube, I had my channel on my domestic language, so Serbian, and I actually did this case, and I actually did a podcast later discussing the theories as well here, and I actually managed to find some interview of Valentina on Russian. So basically I didn't understand a thing she was saying, but she was like a guest on some Russian or Ukrainian or I don't know what TV show, talk show, and she was discussing this case, but that video is like completely gone now, so doesn't exist. And I also had another video that when she was on the spot, she was like revisiting that scene and did a documentary, and also that video is not present anymore. And there were like 2 separate accounts, so I don't know, maybe it's like coincidence, but I don't know, I find it strange because I wanted to pin also those interviews so you can like judge her facial expressions in that interview and determine could she maybe somehow involved in all this mess. And but yeah, the video is gone. So busy day at the office. I guess that is all I have for you today, and I would love to hear your opinion, your point of view, or of this whole disturbed, insanely mysterious case. And write up in the comments if you have some theory of your own. Maybe I missed something. I didn't include all the theories I came across because, you know, I thought that these 5 would make like the perfect sense, even though the first 2 were like complete garbage. But I simply had to include them because they are the official theory of Khamar Daban incident. And as we can see, it's all a bunch of, I don't repeat myself again, but BS. That is all for today. I'm gonna jump into my black shirt again and be back on the field so I can bring more cases for you. As always, until the next time, Casual Detective out.